There are things in life that we only understand after passing through a very long season of loneliness. And today, I want to tell you a story like that, a story in which somewhere you may see yourself. Long ago, I knew a young man. He had everything: discipline, diligence, resilience, and a beautiful belief that effort would eventually be rewarded. Every evening, when everyone else left the office, he was still there, sitting under the last remaining yellow light. He believed one simple thing: if I do better than everyone else, life will see me. But year after year went by, and no one saw him. Not a single opportunity, not a single invitation, not a single person asking, do you want to go further? He did not fail because he was weak. He failed only because he was alone. One night, when there was nothing left but the thin sound of wind outside the window, he sat beside me and whispered, Jim, are there doors that are not meant for those who try hard, but for those who are led there by someone else? I looked at him, and in that moment, I felt as if I were looking at an entire generation. People who are doing everything right, yet are never able to step into the next chapter of their lives. Not because they lack skills, not because they lack willpower, but because they lack just one thing, one person. Someone who believes in you, someone who opens a door you cannot open yourself, someone who sees the value inside you, even when you are lost about yourself. And then I understood. The shortest path from where you stand to where you dream of being is not always a straight line. Sometimes it is a bridge. Sometimes it is a name. Sometimes it is a person. When you observe life closely, you will notice something very interesting. The hardest working people are not always the ones who go the farthest. Some move very fast, but stop very early. Some move very slowly, and then one day suddenly surpass everyone else. And you ask yourself, what creates such a massive difference? I used to believe the answer was effort, that if I just worked a little harder, persisted a little longer, my life would change. But after witnessing many destinies, many journeys, I realized something that is not easy to accept. Effort is necessary, but it is not enough. What takes you further often does not lie in your own hands, but in the hands willing to reach out and take yours. I remember once talking with a man in his 40s. He had worked relentlessly for 2 decades, moving from one company to another, doing every kind of job to support his family. Then he sat down, stared into the distance, and said, Jim, I feel like I've been walking in a circle my whole life. I'm not growing, I'm just spinning. He did not lack ability. He did not lack discipline. He lacked only one thing, the right connection. Everyone has talent at some level. Everyone has value on some plane. But not everyone has someone who sees them. Not everyone meets someone who says, I believe in you, let me open a door for you to step through. The root of the problem lies here. We live in a world that seems crowded, yet everyone mistakenly believes they must fight alone. We learn to fend for ourselves, to take responsibility, to solve every difficulty on our own, to the point that we forget no great road is ever built by a single person. The bridges that change your life always are built by people. Some people stand their entire lives on the riverbank, wading step by step into the current, hoping that one day they will reach the other side. But the water is strong, the current is fierce. Without a bridge, they remain where they are. They think they are moving forward, but in reality, they are only using all their strength to avoid being swept backward. And then one day, they look at someone else, someone who started much later, someone with fewer skills and less experience, yet just because of an introduction, a nod, a moment of trust, that person crosses to the other side in a single step, not because they are better, not because they are luckier, but because they are not walking alone. The most painful thing is not that you have not succeeded yet. The most painful thing is that you might have succeeded long ago. If only you had met the right person, someone who helps you see your own worth, someone who opens opportunities you cannot open yourself, someone who places you where you belong, even before you dare to ask for it. We live in an era where everyone talks about money, but very few talk about invisible assets, the things you cannot see, yet that decide everything. A chance to change careers, a sentence spoken at the right moment, an introduction that seems small, someone standing on your side when you are still doubting yourself. These are the moments that change a life. And strangely enough, they do not come from extreme effort, they come from people. I have seen people who had everything in their hands, knowledge, skills, willpower, but no one to lift them up, and they stayed stuck. I have also seen people who had only one thing, someone who believed in them, and they went far, very far. Have you ever asked yourself, why do I work so hard, yet life remains silent? If so, you are not wrong, but perhaps you are knocking on the wrong door. Or perhaps you are knocking on a door with no one standing behind it. The root of the problem is not that you lack ability. The root is this: you are not being seen, not the right people, not the right environment, not the right relationships. And when you are not seen, your talent is only darkness that no one has turned the light on. I want to tell you a story that I have carried in my heart for many years. A story about a man whose fate changed simply because the right person appeared at the right moment. His name was Samuel. The day I met him, Samuel was just over 30, yet his shoulders carried the weight of an entire lifetime. He worked 2 jobs at once to support his family. Mornings at a woodworking shop, nights at a cargo yard by the port. His hands were so calloused that they had almost lost all feeling. And yet he always smiled, the kind of smile of someone who has learned to press all exhaustion inward so others do not have to worry. But Samuel had something special. He was incredibly skillful with his hands. The chairs he made, the small objects he shaped from wood, all carried a strange kind of beauty. Not the perfection of a seasoned craftsman, but the subtlety of a soul that knew how to listen to the material in his hands. Once he said to me, "Jim, wood is like people. If you force it, it breaks. If you understand it, it becomes a work of art." I knew immediately that in another world, under different circumstances, Samuel could have been a renowned artisan. But life placed him where no one saw him. Then one day, when I stopped by the woodworking shop where he worked, I found Samuel sitting quietly beside a broken table. Unlike his usual cheerful self, that day he looked deeply sad. I asked, "What's wrong, Samuel?" He sighed and said, "I've worked for so many years, Jim, and no one knows what I'm good at. I just want one opportunity, even just once, to do what I'm truly good at." That sentence touched me, because I knew that the feeling of having ability but being hidden by life. And then something unexpected happened. That day, a regular customer brought in an old cabinet that was damaged. Samuel carefully examined every grain of wood, every crack, then repaired it with a focus filled with respect. When he finished, the cabinet looked as if it had been brought back to life. The customer stood there looking at it for a long time, then said just one sentence, "How long have you been doing this? I know someone who might need your talent." That sentence was that simple. But it was the bridge Samuel had waited his entire life for. That customer introduced Samuel to the owner of a large workshop that specialized in restoring rare wooden pieces. They saw what the old workplace had never seen: hands that listened to the material, a soul that worked with heart. Just a few weeks later, Samuel left his old shop. A few months later, he was entrusted with the most important pieces. A few years later, he opened a small workshop of his own where clients had to wait months just to own a piece bearing his name. And I still remember one afternoon, as the sun softened, Samuel said to me, "Jim, my life didn't change because I worked harder. My life changed because someone saw me." The light in his eyes when he said that shone in a way no amount of hard labor could ever dim. Samuel's story reminds me of a truth many of us forget. We do not lack talent, we only lack people who lift us up. An introduction at the right time, a door opening on the very day you are about to collapse. A person who says, "Let me guide you to the other side." Have you noticed? No one climbs a mountain alone. There is always a hand somewhere guiding you, steadying you, supporting you. But that hand only appears when you step into the right circle, the right environment, the right relationships. And then you realize life is not a place where you fight alone. Life is a network of people. And when just one link connects to the right one, the entire journey can turn in a completely different direction. Samuel was not lucky. Samuel simply met the right person after many years of persistence that no one saw. And perhaps you are standing in that very moment too, missing just one thing. One person who sees the value you carry, the value you yourself sometimes forget you have. There is one thing I understood only much later. Relationships do not just change opportunities, they change you. And when you change, Everything in your life changes with you. Think about it. We grow up believing life is a straight line: effort, improvement, success. But in reality, life is made of slopes. There are stretches where you move fast, stretches where you move slowly, and stretches where it feels like you cannot move at all. And then, with just one person, the right person walking beside you, you realize you go much farther than when you were alone. A mentor does not just give us knowledge, he gives us vision. A companion does not just give us joy, they give us endurance. A supporter does not just open a door, they open another version of ourselves. I once watched a young apprentice learning in a small workshop. When he arrived, he knew only basic techniques. His skills were weak, his mindset unsteady. But that workshop had a teacher, not famous, not flashy, but possessing an invaluable gift: the ability to see potential in others. He did not just teach him how to hold tools. He taught him how to stand, how to breathe, how to respect the material in his hands. And just 1 year later, that young apprentice was no longer the timid boy of his first day, but a craftsman working with the confidence of someone who had found his place. Do you see? The right person can shorten the time you spend groping in the dark. Not because they drag you forward faster, but because they turn on the light in the room where you have been feeling around without finding an exit. And here is an important insight many people overlook. You do not grow only through effort. You grow through reflection. Every person we meet in life is like a mirror. Some show you your strengths, some show you your limits, some show you the version you could become if you dare to step past fear. But there are also mirrors that distort your image relationships, that make you doubt yourself, shrink, fade. And if you stand too long before those mirrors, you forget who you are. There is a sentence I have carried my whole life: the people you spend time with will define your future. It is no accident that this sentence has existed for decades and never grown outdated, because we are creatures of the environment, of energy, of frequency, of influence. Observe closely. A capable person who stays around negativity long enough will eventually lose their sharpness. An ordinary person who stays beside someone with a broad vision will eventually grow beyond what they imagined possible. Relationships are like the wind. You cannot see the wind, but you see the boat change direction. You cannot see the influence of the people beside you, but you see your life move with them. I once met a young man who came to hear me speak in a small town. At the end, he approached me and asked, "Jim, how can I change my life?" I looked at him and asked in return, "Who are you spending your time with?" He fell silent. I knew the answer was right there, because the truth is, you cannot soar if you live in a chicken coop. You cannot see far if you stand among people who only look at the ground. You cannot be strong if you are surrounded by people who live in fear. The greatest insight in this topic is not relationships help you succeed. It is relationships determine who you become. And when who you are changes, your career, finances, opportunities all change with it. That is why when we talk about investing in relationships, we are not talking about dependence. We are talking about the exchange of energy, the expansion of vision, the strengthening of inner capacity, growth that we cannot create on our own. Success is never the journey of one person. It is always a journey marked by the fingerprints of many people, especially one person, the one who helps you become the best version of yourself. And when you meet that person, your life will turn to a new chapter as gently as sunrise, when darkness disappears on its own. When we understand that relationships are an invisible asset that shapes a life, the natural question becomes, so in real life, what should I do? Where do I start? And I often say, you don't need to start by finding the right person. You just need to start by becoming the kind of person the right person would want to walk toward. I'm not talking about perfection. I'm talking about truth. Once, I attended a small meeting of a business group in the suburbs. A newcomer arrived, sat in the corner of the room, and didn't say much. But I noticed, whenever someone needed help, he was the first to stand up. If someone forgot paper and a pen, he offered them. If someone was flustered, he guided them. At the end, when everyone left, he stacked the chairs and cleaned up the tables without anyone asking. No one knew his name that day. But 2 weeks later, the group leader found me and said, "Jim, that young guy from the other day, I want to bring him into the core group. I like the way he shows up." Do you see? People aren't drawn to talent first. They're drawn to attitude, to energy, to how you make them feel when they're around you. In real life, relationships aren't built with words. They're built with small moments like that. I remember a young woman once asked me, "How can I connect with people who are better than me?" I smiled and answered, "Start by making them respect the version of you you are right now." People with vision aren't looking for perfection. They're looking for character. And character is revealed most clearly in the actions no one sees, the small things no one notices, the promises you keep with yourself before you keep them with anyone else. Real life application is sometimes that simple. I once knew an older man, the owner of a small shop, famous for being picky. But what impressed me was this: he always gave opportunities to young people who dared to ask. One day, I asked him, "Why do you favor them like that?" He smiled. "Because the ones who dare to ask are the ones who dare to move forward. They're not afraid to admit they don't know yet." And people like that, I want to lift up. From that day on, I understood something important. Opportunity sometimes doesn't come from being good, but from being real. Be real about what you know. Be real about what you don't know. Be real about the things you're still clumsy at. In real life, what builds relationship capital isn't big handshakes, but quiet consistency. A small promise you kept, showing up on time because you respect others, a check-in message with no ulterior motive, an action that helps someone carry a little less weight. Those things aren't loud, but they create a quiet kind of credibility around you, like a pleasant scent that everyone wants to come closer to. And then one day, you notice something interesting. People of value start paying attention to you. Not because you chase them, but because your energy speaks for you. I've watched many young people change their lives simply because they kept planting small things. Not impressive things, but decent things. And when the big moment comes, their names get called. You know something? In real life, opportunities rarely come from grand meetings or big events. They usually come from a simple coffee, a gentle introduction, someone saying, "I think you should meet him. You two would be a good fit." The practical application is right here. Let life speak about you before you speak about yourself. Make people remember you for something good, no matter how small, and you'll see doors open in ways you never expected. And if you ask, where do I start? I'll just say this softly. Start by becoming someone you'd be proud to be friends with. The rest, life will handle. There's one thing that the older I get, the more I believe absolutely. Life doesn't change when you change jobs, change where you live, or change your goals. Life only changes when you change the people you allow into your life. I spent years reading, learning, working, believing hard work would lead me to a better future. But at a certain point, I realized the truth that felt harsh. All our effort only works when it's placed in the right environment, and that environment is created by people. Like a seed, it doesn't matter how good it is. If you put it in dry, barren soil, it will slowly wither. If you put it in fertile ground, it won't just grow, it will spread. I look back on my own life, the seasons when I thrived the most were always tied to the people who were beside me at the right time. They didn't give me money. They didn't give me assets. They gave me perspective, and a new perspective creates a new life. You see, some people say one sentence to you, and your entire life turns around that sentence. Some people appear for only 6 months, yet influence you more than people who have stayed beside you for 10 years. Why? Because they don't touch your life. They touch your essence. Remember this, you are not paid for your time. You are paid for the value you bring to the market. And that value, the most important part, isn't formed in books, but in relationships that nurture you. You learn discipline from someone who lives by principles. You learn calm from someone who can keep their inner peace through storms. You learn vision from someone ahead of you who shows you where you're going, not just where you're standing. There's a philosophy I want you to hear very slowly. Relationships don't change your life. Relationships change you, and you will change your life. When you're around people with vision, you start thinking bigger. When you're around kind people, you start living more beautifully. When you're around disciplined people, you naturally want to become a better version of yourself. And when you're around negative people, you slowly wither without even realizing it. A friend once asked me, "Jim, how do I know if I'm going in the right direction?" I said, "Look at the people walking with you. Are they lifting you up or pulling you down? Do they make you brighter, or do you slowly fade?" Few people realize this. You can measure the health of your life by the quality of the relationships you keep. You can measure the direction of your future by the people you spend time with today. I've witnessed people change dramatically in just a few years, not because they learned something brand new, but because they stepped into a new circle. A circle that demanded they become better. A circle that made it impossible for them to stay the same person. And when you step into a circle like that, you don't just change direction, you change your life. There's an image I always carry. You are like a candle. A candle cannot make itself bigger. It only burns brighter when it's near other candles that are already burning. A strong candle doesn't steal your flame, it gives you flame. And from that, I understand why successful people always value relationships more than assets. Because assets can be lost overnight. But if you have the right people beside you, you can rebuild from zero, and even better than before. That is the deepest philosophy of invisible assets. It's not in what you have, it's in who you become because of the people you walk with. When you understand this, you stop seeing relationships as transactions. You see them as the soil you plant yourself in and the place where you grow. And from that moment, you begin choosing people. And more importantly, you begin to choose the version of yourself. When you look back on your life, you may realize something very interesting. That the biggest turning points don't come from loud upheavals, but from quiet people who appear at the right time. A friend casually introduces you to someone. A teacher places a sentence in your hand that you think about for years. A stranger sees something in you that you've never named. Life always sends signals through people. It's just that sometimes we're too busy to notice. If today you feel like you're moving too slowly, or life isn't opening the way you hoped, it may not be because you're going the wrong way. It may only be because you've been walking alone for too long. And no great road is designed for a solitary person. We are born to give, receive, learn, share. And when you open your heart to that, life softens. And doors will open in ways you never expected. Think about the 5 people you spend the most time with. Do they give you more strength? Or do they take away your clarity? Do they help you see farther? Or do they make you shrink back in fear? Just changing one person in your circle, and your future has already shifted in a different direction. And the most beautiful thing is, you don't have to search for perfection. You only need to search for truth, kindness, directness, genuine encouragement. Those things can't be priced in money, yet they're worth more than anything money can buy. I want you to hear this sentence very slowly. Money can be lost. Assets can be lost. But if you keep the right people beside you, you can rebuild everything. And sometimes that right person is waiting for you to step into a more interesting version of yourself. If you've made it to this point and something inside you stirs, a fleeting image, a face you suddenly remember, leave it below. Not for me to count, but for you to confirm to yourself that it's time to care for the relationships that nourish your life. Thank you for staying with me until now. If these shares touched you and reminded you of something important, I invite you to keep walking this journey with me. Please hit like, subscribe to the channel, not because of the algorithm, but because we're going to have many long, very real conversations like this. And before we end, I want to send you a sentence I always carry. Success isn't something you chase, it's something you attract because of who you become. Wishing you the people who help you become the brightest version of yourself. See you in the next video.